Hey everybody, it's Retro DM Ray. I'm back with you on the channel, and I thought I would read an article for you that is actually from the Best of Dragon Revised Edition from the Strategic Review and the Dragon Volumes 1 and 2. This article is also by the illustrious Mr. Gygax. So I thought we would hear from his voice again today about a particular subject that, of course, is near and dear to my heart, which is about DMs. Again, if you like this content, click the like button, give me a subscribe, give me a share. I would really appreciate that. Take a look at the description how you can support the channel in various ways, Patreon, PayPal, all that kind of stuff. I would really appreciate that. So again, let's get on with the coverage of this article. I'm going to read it in a moment, but what this article is titled is D&D is only as good as the DM. That is a bit of a charged statement today because over the last few years, especially during the lockdown time, and that may get this video completely censored or deleted by YouTube, we'll see. But during that time period, over the last couple of years plus, I have noticed a trend in gaming to create games, whether they want to reflect OSR or whether they're new school systems. Predominantly, it's the new school systems for the most part, however. But I think there's a philosophy or a design approach that incorporates this even into some so-called OSR systems as well, which is that the DM is kind of the adversary. The DM is kind of a backseat driver, if you will, that the game is really all about only the players. If you've seen any of the new modern systems, oh my goodness, it's all about the players and the players. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with that. I love having players, but I think the game master and his role is incredibly significant, and I'm going to say the dungeon master now from this point forward is incredibly significant because I play predominantly Dungeons and Dragons. I do play some Forbidden Lands a little bit. And I have done Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and I can just tell you, this is just my opinion, so take it or leave it as that. But if you're playing that system, if you can't tell that that system is specifically built and designed to be all only about the players and the DM's just an afterthought, then I don't know if you're reading that correctly. I don't know if you're really absorbing what's really going on there. It is so detailed, so crunchy, and so laid out. And I think 5th edition suffers a little bit from this too. Everything has to be kind of explained away in the rule system in such a way that you kind of feel compelled to play raw, if you will. And in Pathfinder 2nd edition, you kind of have to play Pathfinder 2nd edition as raw, or you're not really playing it. You're not really going to play it. That's my opinion. Again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it as far as I play it with my wife and kids a little bit because they want to play it. Not necessarily my thing, but it's their thing, and I love to game with them, so that's cool. But just take a look at those new systems and just see if you might not agree with me on this particular point. I think, for me, my opinion is that this started towards the tail end of 2nd edition, maybe even starting with the Splat books, but certainly at the tail end of 2nd edition as it approached 3rd edition, and then on from there, it just became a DM adversarial versus players are the greatest thing since sliced bread, if you will. And so I want to read what Gary has to say here in this article about the idea of the game being only as good as the DM. So here goes. He says, successful play of D&D is a blend of desire, skill, and luck. Desire is often initiated by actually participating in a game. It is absolutely a reflection of the referee's ability to maintain an interesting and challenging game. Skill is a blend of knowledge of the rules and game background as applied to the particular game circumstances favored by the referee. Memory or recall is often a skill function. Luck is the least important of the three, but is a factor in successful play nonetheless. Using the above criteria, it would seem that players who have attained a skill or more of levels in their respective campaigns are successful indeed. This is quite generally untrue. Usually such meteoric rise simply reflects an incompetent dungeon master. While adventurers in a D&D campaign must grade their play to their referee, it is also incumbent upon the dungeon master to suit his campaign to the participants. This interaction is absolutely necessary if the campaign is to continue to be of interest to all parties. It is often a temptation to the referee to turn his dungeons into a veritable gift shop of magical goodies ripe for plucking by his players. Similarly, by a bit of fudging, outdoor expeditions become trips to the welfare department for heaps of loot. Monsters exist for the slaying of the adventurers, whether of the sort who guard treasure or of the wandering variety. Experience points are heaped upon the undeserving heads of players, levels accumulated like dead leaves in autumn, and if players with standings in the 20s, 30s, and 40s of level do not become bored, they typically become filled with an entirely false sense of accomplishment. They are puffed up with hubris. As they have not really earned their standings, and their actual ability has no reflection on their campaign level, they are easily deflated, killed, in a game which demands competence in proportionate measure to players' levels. It is therefore time that referees reconsider their judging. First, is magic actually quite scarce in your dungeons? It should be. Likewise, treasures should be proportionate both to the levels of the dungeon and the monsters guarding them. Second, absolute disinterest must be exercised by the dungeon master, and if a favorite player stupidly puts himself in a situation where he is about to get killed, let the dice tell the story and kill him. This is not to say that you should never temper chance with a bit of divine intervention, but helping players should be a rare act on the referee's part, and the action should only be taken when fate seems to have unjustly condemned an otherwise good player, and then not in every circumstance should the referee intervene. Third, create personas for the inhabitants of your dungeon. If they're intelligent, they would act cleverly to preserve themselves and slay intruding expeditions out to do them in and steal their treasures. The same is true for wandering monsters. Fourth, there should be some high-level, very tricky and clever chaps in the nearest inhabitation of the dungeon, folks who skin adventurers out of their wealth just as prospectors were generally fleeced for their gold in the Old West. When the campaign turkeys flock to town trying to buy magical weapons, potions, scrolls, various other items of magical nature, and get a chum turned back to flesh, have a corpse resurrected, or whatever, make them pay through the proverbial noses. For example, what would a player charge for like items or services? Find out. Add a good bit, and that is the cost that you as a referee make your personas charge. This will certainly be entertaining to you, and laying little traps in addition will keep the players on their collective toes. After all, dungeon masters are entitled to a little fun too. Another point to remember is that you should keep a strict account of time. The wizard who spends 6 months writing scrolls and enchanting items is out of the campaign for 6 months. He cannot play during these 6 game months, and if the time system is anywhere reflective of the proper scale, that means a period of actual time in the neighborhood of 3 months. That will pretty well eliminate all that sort of foolishness. Ingredients for scroll writing and potion making should also be stipulated. We will treat this in an upcoming issue of SR, Strategic Review, or in D&D Supplement, as it should be dealt with at length, so that is no easy task to prepare scrolls or duplicate potions. When players no longer have reams of goodies at their fingertips, they must use their abilities instead, and as you will have major dungeons and wildernesses far more difficult and demanding, it will require considerable skill, imagination, and intellectual exercise to actually gain from the course of an adventure. Furthermore, when magic is rare, it is valuable, and only if it is scarce will there be real interest in seeking it. When it's difficult to survive, a long process to gain levels, when there are many desired items of magical nature to seek for, then a campaign is interesting and challenging. Think about how much fun it is to have something handed to you on a silver platter. Nice once in a while, but unappreciated when it becomes a common occurrence. This analogy applies to experience and treasures in the D&D campaign. It requires no careful study to determine that D&D is aimed at progression, which is geared to the approach above. There are no monsters to challenge the capabilities of 30th level lords, 40th level patriarchs, and so on. Now I know of the games played at Caltech where the rules have been expanded and changed to reflect incredibly high levels, comic book characters and spells, and so on. Okay, different strokes for different folks, but that is not D&D. While D&D is pretty flexible, that sort of thing stretches it too far, and the boys out there are playing something entirely different. Perhaps their own name, Dungeons and Beavers, tells it best. It is reasonable to calculate that if a fair player takes part in 50 to 75 games in the course of a year, he should acquire sufficient experience points to make him about 9th to 11th level, assuming that he manages to survive all that play. Well, that is definitely different than Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Every 1 or 2 gaming sessions, you're making a level. This level of patience of leveling and stuff is just not a thing. Anyway, I digress. And I'm not knocking it just to be knocking it. I'm just saying that's my opinion. The acquisition of successfully higher levels will be proportionate to enhanced power and the number of experience points necessary to attain them. So another year of play will by no means mean a doubling of levels, but rather the addition of perhaps 2 or 3. Using this gauge, it should take 4 or 5 years to see 20th level. As Blackmoor is the only campaign with a life of 5 years, and Greyhawk with a life of 4 is the second longest running, the most able adventurers should not yet have attained 20th level except in the 2 named campaigns. To my knowledge, no player in either Blackmoor or Greyhawk has ever risen above 14th level as of yet. By requiring players to work for experience, to earn their treasure, means that the opportunity to retain interest will remain. It will also mean that the rules will fit the existing situation. A dragon, Balrog, or whatever will be a fearsome challenge rather than a pushover. It is still up to the dungeon master to make the campaign really interesting to his players by adding imaginative touches through exertion to develop background and detailed data regarding the campaign, and to make certain that there is always something new and exciting to learn about or to acquire. It will, however, be an easier task. So if a 33rd level wizard reflects a poorly managed campaign, a continuing mortality rate of 50% per expedition generally reflects overreaction, and likewise a poorly managed campaign. It is unreasonable to place 3 blue dragons on the first dungeon level, just as it is unreasonable to allow a 10th level fighter to rampage through the upper levels of a dungeon, rousting kobolds and giant rats to gain easy loot and experience. When you tighten up your refereeing, be careful not to go too far the other way. So this is the swing back and forth. Remember, this is the very burgeoning days of Dungeons and Dragons we're talking about here. Okay, this magazine has a date of 1985 for this one, but this article dates back to 1975. Okay, so these are the burgeoning days of Dungeons and Dragons, but these things still apply today. Require players to work for the experience, to earn their treasure. That's the opportunity to retain interest. That's the way it's going to remain. You'll also mean that rules will fit the existing situation. They'll have a fearsome challenge rather than just a pushover. It'll make the campaign interesting. You'll add, as a dungeon master, imaginative touches throughout this process, things that they can develop, detail the data, make certain there's always something new and exciting to learn or acquire. Okay, but let them slowly progress onward. There's a thing today that I see a lot online, which is people do this idea of builds, and they just build and build and build and build and build and build and build, and they just keep going in that direction. So it's a constant state of change. There's no patience. There's no desire to fully flesh out your character as you go along. You want to start your character with reams of paper of background and then play, rather than a little single paragraph of stuff like, this is basically my dude Johnny here, and then play. And throughout the longevity of the course of that play, you're writing that character's story. How much more wonderful is that? Again, this is just my opinion. But Gary knew these things back in 75, and I think it's important that they remain in the game today, and I think that they're largely lost. Again, these are my humble opinions. You run your game how you want to run it to have the maximum fun for you and your group. That's totally cool. Use whatever system is fun for you to do that. But I just wanted to share this article with you from the older first offering of the Best of Dragon here, from both the Strategic Review and the Dragon Volumes 1 and 2. I just thought it was neat to read this and kind of visit this issue today. So I hope you like that. I'm trying to get another video out to you, again, for more of this dragon stuff. If you're liking that, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subbed, please do so. And share it around, please. I'd really appreciate that. Take a look at the description in the video to support the channel, as I said before. And thanks for tuning in, and may you prosper and have some good games. Take care. Later.